A black teenager is walking home in broad daylight. A police officer stops him. No reason, no evidence, just suspicion because of his skin color. But the boy doesn't panic. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply stands still. And it is that silence that shakes the entire system. But what no one expected was his father, a man who seemed ordinary, living quietly in the neighborhood, until his son was taken in broad daylight. That's when he didn't call 911. But activated a code only those who once operated in the shadows would understand. And what happened next made the entire town take a hard look at itself. Are you ready to step into a story where justice doesn't come from the courtroom, but from courage and understanding? Don't look away, because every second that follows will leave you thinking long after it ends. The sky over Ashgrove Ridge that afternoon was unusually clear, with sunlight spilling across the red brick sidewalks and reflecting off the neatly trimmed lawns. Malik Carter, a 17-year-old student at Southridge High, walked slowly down his usual path home. Headphones in, basketball bag slung over his shoulder, Malik looked like any other teenager after practice. But what made him different wasn't his appearance or behavior, it was simply his skin color. Ashgrove Ridge was a quiet, upscale neighborhood where the uniform white picket fences mirrored the prevailing mindset, tidy, polished, and only suited for certain kinds of people. The Carter family had lived there for over 10 years, quietly, respectfully, without ever causing trouble. And yet, every time Malik passed by Mrs. Gladys Whitaker's house, the elderly neighbor known for always keeping an eye, the curtain would twitch unnecessarily. Malik didn't bother turning around. He was used to stares like that, to unfounded suspicion, to having to prove his harmlessness in a place that was supposed to be called home. His father once told him, "You don't need to make them afraid of you, but you do need to make sure they know you're not easy to dismiss." When Malik reached the third corner near the old convenience store where he usually bought sports drinks, that familiar sound, the one that always made his heart beat faster, came from behind. The slow roll of car tires on pavement. A police cruiser was silently trailing him like a shadow. The cold, creeping feeling traveled up his spine, a survival reflex. The car stopped. The window rolled down. "Hey, stop for a sec," came a firm, unfriendly voice from inside the car. Malik pulled out one earbud and turned around, his expression surprisingly calm. He knew this game. His father had trained him for situations exactly like this. "Yes, officer," he replied. The man stepped out tall, pale-skinned, buzz-cut like military, with a face so rigid it could be mistaken for authority. On his chest, the nameplate read, Seth Donnelly. Newly assigned to Ashgrove Ridge just a few weeks ago, but his reputation within the black community had spread like wildfire, cold, aggressive, and fond of asking questions that didn't need answers. "What are you doing around here?" Donnelly asked, his eyes scanning Malik from head to toe like he was frisking a criminal. "I live in this neighborhood, just walking home from the court," Malik replied, voice soft as air, but steady as stone. "Got any ID?" Malik nodded, slowly unzipping his backpack, keeping both hands visible just like his father had taught him. He pulled out his school ID. Donnelly glanced at it briefly, then lowered his voice and sneered. "Where's your dad? Or is it one of those single mom deals?" He let out a dry laugh. "Isn't that how it usually goes with you people?" Malik's chest rose with a quiet surge, but his gaze held firm. "My father's in the Special Operations Unit." A beat of silence. Then a loud laugh burst out of Donnelly, echoing down the quiet street. "Special Ops? You sure you're not confusing that with some video game?" Malik didn't respond. He stood tall, eyes neither defiant nor submissive, just unshaken. Amid the mocking laughter, a girl behind a nearby tree silently raised her phone. Alyssa Monroe, a classmate, who had long known exactly who Malik was, and it had nothing to do with who his father was. But Officer Donnelly didn't know that. All he saw was a black teenager in a neighborhood that wasn't his. And for some, that alone was enough to stir a storm, even from the gentlest breeze. There are moments that seem harmless as they pass, yet they awaken something dangerous beneath the surface. For Officer Seth Donnelly, that moment came when Malik Carter uttered the words, "My father is in Special Operations." That statement, brief, calm, completely non-confrontational, stabbed straight into the ego of a man carrying the unhealed scar of failure. Donnelly had once enrolled in military training but was discharged halfway through for being psychologically and command incompatible. It was a subject he never mentioned, a nameless wound, a deeply embedded insecurity. And now, a black teenager walking with a basketball shoe bag had looked him straight in the eye and said the word Special Ops. Donnelly didn't laugh anymore once he returned to his vehicle. Instead, he opened his onboard laptop and quickly typed, Jeremiah Carter Special Operations. No specific results, no bio, no image, just one cold message. Restricted classified access required. To anyone else, that screen would be a signal to stop, but to Donnelly, it was fuel to the fire. The next morning, Donnelly returned to the Ash Grove Ridge neighborhood, this time not in a patrol car, but in a personal gray sedan with tinted windows. He parked 2 houses away from number 58, the Carter residence, at a distance where he could clearly observe the white gate, the small balcony, and the second-floor windows always shielded by curtains. His first point of contact was Mrs. Gladys Whitaker, the nosy neighbor. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Officer Donnelly, conducting a safety check as part of a new community program," he said with a friendly smile, holding a notebook like a dedicated journalist. "Oh, that's wonderful. There have been people wandering around at night lately. It's got me a bit worried," Mrs. Whitaker replied without a hint of suspicion. "Do you happen to know how long the Carter family has lived at number 58? "Over a decade. Vanessa's suite works at some hospital, I think." The boy, Malik, well behaved but quiet. As for her husband, strange man, hardly ever seen. Donnelly nodded and jotted things down. Her answer echoed what he later collected while casually speaking with other neighbors. "Don't really know what Mr. Carter does. He's in and out. Family keeps to themselves. Malik's polite, but no one really knows him." And that no one really knows bit in Donnelly's mind wasn't privacy, it was concealment. That night, he crept around to the back of the Carter house. The lights were still on. But instead of staying on the street, this time Donnelly slipped behind the fence and hid in the ferns. He snapped a few blurry pictures with his phone, just an ordinary house with a tidy porch and windows covered in sun-blocking film. But it was that very normalcy that made him even more suspicious. A father in special ops, silent, no records, no social media, no one's ever seen him. Donnelly kept repeating these facts like a riddle waiting to be solved. What he didn't realize or intentionally ignored was that tucked in the corner of the house, a miniature security camera had recorded his every move. And elsewhere, far from Ash Grove Ridge, a man with piercing eyes had begun monitoring this officer's actions, watching from the shadows. To Donnelly, Malik was just another kid who needed to be investigated. But to Jeremiah Carter, the man quietly returning home, it was a signal, a warning that the sanctuary he had built for over a decade was now under threat. And when that happened, the response wouldn't come from anger, but from the most primal instinct of any father: protection. Mornings in Ash Grove Ridge usually began with the gentle sound of birdsong and the aroma of coffee drifting from homes with east-facing windows. But that day, the atmosphere inside house number 58 was heavier than usual. Vanessa Carter sat at the kitchen table wearing her hospital manager uniform from St. Anne's, her eyes still clouded with unease despite her composed appearance. Malik had just finished washing his hands and was about to leave the house when his mother spoke quietly but clearly, "We need to talk." He stopped. Just 4 words, but in this family they always signaled something more than simple conversation. Vanessa unlocked her phone and handed it to him. On screen was a video from the backyard security system. The image was grainy but clear enough to recognize Officer Donnelly crouching around the house in the middle of the night, taking pictures, scribbling notes, and peering through windows. "He came back," she said. Her voice wasn't angry, it was composed, as though facing an emergency that demanded absolute clarity. Malik stared at the screen. "I thought, you filed the complaint?" "I did, and the police department is reviewing it. But you need to understand, some people don't act based on the law. They act based on fear, and fear can be more dangerous than bullets." Malik nodded, his eyes darkening. "I'm sorry for telling him about Dad that day." Vanessa paused. She walked over and placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "It's not your fault. You did the right thing. But now, we need to be more cautious. Every word, every action can be twisted into whatever they want to hear." Malik lowered his voice. "I just couldn't stand him implying Dad abandoned us. I don't want him thinking Dad was a bad father." Vanessa gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. In her eyes, kindness and sharpness coexisted like sunlight filtering through frosted glass. Jeremiah Carter was never a bad father, but the truth about him isn't something you can explain to someone like Donnelly. She turned and walked to a wooden cabinet by the wall. From inside, she pulled out another phone, not one used for everyday communication. This one was matte black, unbranded, no logos. She typed a short message. Alert level, perimeter breach. Surveillance system recorded presence. Recommend full perimeter check. The message was sent to a single contact, Jay. The message was encrypted and auto-deleted after 10 seconds. Malik watched silently, asking nothing, but deep down, he knew that silence itself was the answer to the questions that had long lingered inside him. That evening, while Malik pretended to study in his room, he heard the doorbell ring. He stepped out to find his mother standing at the door with a man in plain clothes, a lieutenant from the Southridge Police Department, there to follow up on the complaint she had filed. Vanessa remained polite and composed, but every word she spoke was firm. I have video footage, witnesses, and the name of the officer who is harassing my son. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm demanding a response consistent with the law. The lieutenant simply nodded, offering no resistance. It was clear, even though no one raised their voice, the tension between them had thickened as if something was approaching, slowly but inevitably. Upstairs, in the attic lit by a single small lamp, Malik opened an old drawer and pulled out the wooden box his father had given him before his last deployment. He had never opened it, only kept it as a silent promise. But tonight, his hand rested on the lid. He didn't open it yet, but he knew the moment was coming. The next morning, something about the atmosphere at Southridge High School felt unusually quiet. The low murmur of conversation in the hallways lacked the carefree tone of most days. Small groups of students huddled together, eyes glued to their phones, watching a video clip barely a minute long that was spreading like wildfire. Footage of Malik Carter being stopped and questioned by a police officer as if he had committed a serious crime when all he was doing was walking home. The angle wasn't perfect, but it clearly captured the sneering expressions of Officer Seth Donnelly, and just as clearly it showed Malik's calm, almost defiant gaze. Alyssa Monroe had edited the footage, carefully adding captions, a short statement, and a headline that read, "This is Malik, my friend. He didn't do anything wrong." The video struck a nerve not just with a small group of students, but with many, especially students of color. It sparked a visceral feeling. That could have been me. At lunchtime, Malik sat alone, as usual. He was used to not really belonging to any particular group, but today, he felt the weight of every gaze in the cafeteria, no longer filled with indifference like in his early days at school, but with a mix of curiosity, discomfort, and respect. He didn't react. He quietly ate the sandwich his mom had packed, as if nothing had changed. But then, the silence broke. "Hey Malik," came the voice of Tyler Jensen, one of those classmates who liked to clown around, the son of a local real estate agent. Tyler strolled over, voice half joking, half taunting. "Heard your dad's some kind of special ops? Like Rambo or something?" A round of laughter erupted from the boys at his table. Malik didn't reply. He set his sandwich down, looked Tyler straight in the eye, not angry, not hostile, just a gaze that drew a clear boundary. "My dad is my dad. Maybe you should ask yours why he's so interested in my family." Tyler froze. A few kids nearby tried not to laugh. The usual control he held in moments like these slipped out of his hands. He hesitated, then turned and walked away. Less than a minute later, Alyssa appeared and sat down across from Malik. She didn't speak immediately. She set her phone on the table, locked the screen, and then said, "You know that video I posted? It's already being shared in the school group, right?" Malik nodded slightly. "I didn't post it to stir things up," Alyssa continued. "I just thought people needed to see what's really happening." "I know," Malik replied softly. "Thanks for standing up." Alyssa looked at him for a moment, then said, almost in a whisper, "My dad's a lawyer. Civil rights. If you ever want to talk, we can ask him." Malik met her eyes, not surprised, but grateful. "I'll keep that in mind." At the end of the day, when students began to leave, Malik walked slower than usual. A group of younger students rushed past him, and one small boy looked up with wide eyes, then turned to his friend and whispered, "That's the guy from the video." Malik didn't turn around, but his lips curved slightly, not a full smile, but a real one. Across town, Seth Donnelly sat in front of his computer screen, scrolling through the comments below the video. Some supported him. Others were outraged. But what unsettled him most was the silence. The silence from people within the force. No one spoke up in his defense, no applause, no nods of agreement, just a void. And in that void, something dangerous began to take root, the obsession with being validated. Ash Grove Ridge welcomed a quiet Friday afternoon, as if even the sounds themselves were cautious before the undercurrent silently spreading across the neighborhood. Inside house number 58, Vanessa Carter stepped into the kitchen, placed a folder on the table, and glanced quickly at her phone screen. A short message appeared. "He's back." No signature, but she knew. Somehow, Jeremiah always returned right on time. Less than an hour later, a black, unmarked SUV pulled up along the curb behind the house. The door opened, and a man stepped out. The fading sunlight fell across his charcoal gray shirt and simple jeans, but what drew attention wasn't the clothes, it was the way he walked. Jeremiah Carter didn't need to wear insignia for people to understand who he used to be. The way he stepped, the way he glanced, even the way he held his spine upright when standing still, said it all. He didn't return with a fuss. No entourage, no escort, just a man carrying one question: who touched my family? That night, Jeremiah didn't go home right away. Instead, he headed straight for the Southridge Police Department. He didn't have to raise his voice upon entering the lobby. His presence alone made the seasoned officers take notice, especially when he presented a special military ID, red-edged, no photo, only a serial number and rank. The kind of ID that couldn't be faked and few had ever seen in person. Lieutenant Colonel Ellis, head of internal affairs, was summoned within 3 minutes. "You are Jeremiah Carter. I'm here about the incident involving my son, Malik Carter, and regarding the unauthorized surveillance and trespassing conducted by Officer Seth Donnelly." Ellis paused, not because of the name, but because of the look. The look of someone who didn't need to threaten to make an entire room fall silent. "We are in the process of investigating." Jeremiah nodded, not impatient, not agitated. He simply placed a folder on the table. "This contains a copy of the video footage from my backyard camera, clearly showing Donnelly's trespassing, along with an official request to cease any and all contact with my family." Ellis opened the folder. His eyes lingered on the black and white images Donnelly unmistakably captured, looking like a common intruder, in full uniform. "We'll handle this as quickly as possible." Jeremiah stood. "I hope so, because next time I won't come alone." There was no threat in his tone, but the room dropped a few degrees. When Jeremiah returned home, Vanessa was already waiting at the door. She didn't ask anything. She just looked at him and said softly, "Malik's upstairs. He doesn't know you're back yet." Jeremiah nodded. He walked up the stairs slowly, as if measuring each breath. Standing outside his son's room, he paused, listened. An instrumental track played quietly from a small speaker, blending with the sound of fingers typing on a keyboard. Malik still believed his father was halfway around the world, but now he was here not as a special ops soldier, but in his most important role, a father. Jeremiah knocked gently on the door. "Malik." That knock, that voice made Malik spin around, jumping to his feet as if he couldn't believe his eyes. "Dad? I'm home." No embrace, no tears, just a gaze, direct, deep, and real. In that fleeting moment, all the fear, worry, and doubt seemed to fall away, because the one person he trusted most had returned. There are people who, when cornered, will step back, reflect, and change. But there are also those who choose to attack not out of reason, but because their ego has been wounded beyond control. And unfortunately, Seth Donnelly belonged to the latter group. When he received notice of his temporary suspension pending internal investigation, Donnelly wasn't surprised. In the twisted corridors of his mind, this wasn't a consequence, it was proof. Proof that he was onto something big and dangerous. That evening, in his small apartment, he drank thick coffee as if to replace sleep. On the walls were pinned notes, internal database printouts, and snapshots from his personal camera. Donnelly's mind ran like an overheated engine, too hot to think clearly, too cold to feel consequences. He started making calls, secret calls to a group of former colleagues, men who shared the same bitterness, the same sense of being abandoned by the world. A small group, but dangerous, because they no longer cared about rules. "We didn't do anything wrong," Donnelly said over the phone. "We just want the truth." "You mean breaking and entering?" One voice hesitated. "It's not breaking in, it's gathering evidence. Someone needs to check that family." And so they planned. No warrant, no command from superiors, just a warped belief that justice was in their hands. That night, 5 men in plain clothes wearing gloves and baseball caps moved toward the back of house number 58. Donnelly led the way. The yellow glow of streetlights spilled across the lawn, but they moved like shadows. The back door was locked. But Donnelly brought a lock-picking kit, something from his early military training. The lock clicked softly. They entered, silent. The house was quiet, tidy, as if asleep. They searched each room, the living room, the kitchen, the side storage room. Everything was ordinary. "What are we even doing?" one man exhaled. "What exactly are we looking for?" "Not what," Donnelly answered, eyes scanning the space. "But proof he's hiding something." What they didn't realize was that from the moment they entered, they were being watched. The Carter security system wasn't off the shelf. It was designed not just to record, but to transmit data to a secure monitoring hub, just a few blocks away. There, in a small, unmarked room, Jeremiah Carter sat in front of a screen. On it, every step, every whisper, every expression was displayed. He wasn't angry. He simply watched, assessed, calculated. One man stepped into the backyard and noticed his car wouldn't start. Then another, then a third. "What's going on? My car won't start," someone shouted, panic rising. Donnelly cursed. He understood instantly they weren't the hunters. They were the prey. "We need to get out, now!" But it was too late. The backyard floodlights snapped on. A voice rang out from a loudspeaker. "You are trespassing. All actions have been recorded. Leave the premises immediately." The group scattered in panic, but before they disappeared from the screen, a black SUV quietly appeared at the corner of the street. No chase, no force, just a lesson written in silence and precision. The next morning, each member of the group received an email from the disciplinary division. Attached was a link to the video from the previous night and an invitation to explain before formal disciplinary action is taken. As for Donnelly, when he opened his email, he saw only one line: "Your next move will decide the rest of your career and the last shred of honor you still have." Beneath that sentence, a signature encrypted in digital code: JC. The morning in Ash Grove Ridge unfolded like any other expensive SUVs gliding down the quiet streets, students with backpacks chattering on their way to school, and mothers sipping coffee on their porches. But inside house number 58, everything was operating on a completely different rhythm, cautious, vigilant, and tinged with coldness. After the failed break-in, Jeremiah Carter no longer considered Donnelly a singular threat. He saw him as a danger with the potential to escalate, especially when the pride of a defeated man had been wounded beyond repair. And just as he predicted, Donnelly's next move was no longer indirect. It was frontal. At approximately 11:07 a.m., while Malik was doing homework at the kitchen table, his phone buzzed with a message from Alyssa Monroe. The message read, "Urgent. Meet me at the Crawford Park Trail. Don't tell your parents." Malik frowned. Something felt off. Alyssa never messaged like that. Never asked him to keep secrets, especially not after everything they had been through together. He didn't reply. Instead, he quickly walked to his father's office. Jeremiah was seated at the security control panel, his eyes never leaving the surveillance system since the night before. "I just got a weird message from someone using Alyssa's name, but the wording, it's not her," Malik said. Jeremiah didn't ask further. He immediately opened the routing software and traced the phone number. Within seconds, the result appeared, a spoofed number originating from an unregistered device outside Ash Grove. "Just as you thought, it's not Alyssa. And it's coming from beyond Ash Grove." In minutes, Jeremiah shifted the entire security system to defense mode. The front door locked automatically, shutters engaged, outdoor cameras switched to emergency response mode. "Head upstairs, stay with your mother," he instructed. "Don't leave the second floor, I'll sweep the perimeter." But even such caution couldn't prevent a storm that had already been set in motion. The sound of glass shattering rang out from the living room. Then white smoke spread rapidly like a dense fog. A smoke grenade, not loud, but enough to disorient the entire house. "Step back, don't move!" A muffled shout came through a gas mask. Malik jumped to his feet in panic, turning just in time to see a figure in black gear charging at him, pinning him to the ground. The intruder pressed an elbow into his neck, and his voice, though muffled by the mask, could not hide its identity. "Hello, Malik. Now we can talk alone." Donnelly. Jeremiah rushed in from the hallway, but it was too late. Donnelly had dragged Malik out the back door, where a gray van was waiting. He shoved the boy inside, slammed the door shut, and the vehicle vanished down a side road to the east, as if it had never been there. Jeremiah didn't give chase. He didn't panic. He stepped into the control room and pressed 3 buttons on the security console. Blackbird protocol activated. Scenario, family member abduction. Objective, Track, rescue, no escalation. Vanessa stood beside him, her face pale. "Do you know where to find him?" she asked. Jeremiah nodded. "The watch Malik's wearing? It's not just for telling time." Miles away, in an abandoned storage warehouse, Malik was tied to a wooden chair. He was breathing heavily, his eyes still adjusting to the dim light from a dangling bulb. Donnelly stood in front of him, removing his mask, his face streaked with sweat and twisted in intense frustration. "Who is your father? Tell me. This time, no one's stopping me." But Malik, amid smoke, fear, and confusion, just stared back at him. No defiance, no trembling, just a simple, unwavering look, a refusal to submit. The evening wind swept along the old industrial district on the outskirts of Southridge, carrying with it the smell of damp concrete and rusty iron. Inside an abandoned warehouse, Malik Carter was tightly bound to a rickety wooden chair, his hands trembling slightly from the pressure, but his eyes were still bright, still fixed on the man standing before him, Officer Seth Donnelly. Donnelly paced slowly through the empty space, the gun in his hand swaying gently with each step. His face was pale from tension, eyes bloodshot like someone who hadn't slept in days. But what sent chills through the air wasn't the weapon, it was the obsession in his gaze, an obsession that no longer distinguished right from wrong, only singularly demanded someone to affirm, "I was right." "Your dad's an agent, isn't he? You think I don't know?" Donnelly growled, clutching the gun tighter. Malik didn't answer. He remained silent, like glass not hiding, but not reflecting any emotion that the other could manipulate either. "I've seen the documents, identification codes blacked out, unlisted operations. He's not a regular man, and you're not just a regular student." Still silent. That silence, calm, unwavering, was what drove Donnelly mad. "Say something," he roared, slamming the gun against the wooden table next to Malik, making it rattle, but Malik didn't flinch. Instead of fear, he took a deep breath, remembering his father's words, "In a room full of wolves, you don't need to roar. Just stand still. Let them see you're not afraid." Meanwhile, just miles away, a lone figure moved steadily toward the warehouse. No vehicle, no backup, no noise. Jeremiah Carter was walking on his own 2 feet, weaving through abandoned concrete walls, eyes locked on the tracking device in his hand. The blinking light on the screen pulsed steadily. The signal from the watch Malik always wore had led him here. In his ear was a secure comms device, his voice, low and steady. "I have a fix on the location. No tactical support needed. Just send witnesses after." "You sure about this, Jeremiah? The suspect is armed." "I'm not here to fire a shot. I'm here to end this," he replied, then cut the line. The warehouse door creaked open. A single yellow bulb cast fractured light on the stained concrete floor. Donnelly spun around, gun raised, and froze. Jeremiah Carter stepped inside. No weapon, no body armor, just a father, coming to bring his son home. "Don't come any closer," Donnelly shouted, pointing the gun directly at him. "I'll shoot." Jeremiah didn't stop. He raised both hands slowly, eyes locked onto the man who had turned his breakdown into a cause. "You don't want to do this, Donnelly. Step back. There's still time." "Shut up! You people think you're better than everyone else. Always hiding, always covering up." Donnelly's voice cracked, nearly pleading. Jeremiah spoke calmly. "No one's hiding anything. But some things don't belong in the light. And Malik, he's just a kid." 1 step, 2 steps. Donnelly's hands shook. The gun wavered, no longer steady. "Stop! Stop!" he screamed, then swung the gun toward Malik, a desperate final move. But he never got the chance to pull the trigger. In a heartbeat, Jeremiah surged forward like a shadow. 1 precise strike to the wrist, the gun dropped. A swift turn, and Donnelly was thrown to the ground, limbs limp. No wasted movement, no brutality, just skill, discipline, closure. Jeremiah stood, untied Malik. The boy looked at his father, overcome with emotion, unable to speak. But Jeremiah only placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his gaze soft. "You're safe. I'm here now." At that moment, the warehouse doors burst open. Southridge police and federal agents poured in, surrounding the scene. They had all been informed in advance not to intervene, but to witness. Because men like Jeremiah Carter don't need to prove anything. They only need to show up at the right time. News of the kidnapping and the daring rescue at the abandoned warehouse spread quickly throughout Southridge. Within hours, an image of Jeremiah Carter walking his son out of the chaos with steady posture and an unscathed face became the focus of local media coverage. But what shook the town wasn't the action. It was the truth that emerged afterward. At the Southridge Police Department, Donnelly was handcuffed and escorted into an interrogation room under the watch of 2 federal officers. He was no longer the one in control, no longer armed, no longer shielded by the title of community protector. All that remained was a broken man, wild-eyed, and a file filled with charges: trespassing, kidnapping, threatening a minor, unlawful use of force, abuse of authority, and most damning of all, acts of racially motivated extremism with a systemic pattern. Police Chief Williams received Jeremiah in his office with an expression that mixed awkwardness and unease. "Mr. Carter, what just happened is beyond local jurisdiction. The feds are involved now." Jeremiah didn't sit. He simply stood, placing a special seal file folder on the desk, along with a USB drive containing video footage, audio recordings, and documentation of Donnelly's repeated surveillance and harassment of his family over time. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to protect my son, and I'll do it again if I have to." Williams sighed, eyes lowered toward the folder. In his gaze was an unspoken acknowledgement that justice this time had not come from a badge, but from a father. Back at Southridge High, Malik returned to class after 2 days' absence. No bells, no grand welcome. But when he stepped into the classroom, something no one expected happened. The entire room stood up. No one was told to. They simply stood, as a gesture of respect, as an unspoken apology. Tyler, the one who had mocked him in front of the entire cafeteria, stepped forward, head bowed slightly. I'm sorry. I didn't understand anything." Malik didn't smile, but he nodded, and he answered with what his father once taught him. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means not letting hatred control you." And Alyssa Monroe, the one who filmed the original video and helped spark a wave of justice in the community, was now invited to speak at the citywide student forum. Her video was used in civics classes, shared at teacher workshops, and even caught the attention of several universities offering journalism scholarships. "I just hit record," she told Malik one late afternoon, "but you're the one who made people open their eyes." Malik smiled, for the first time in many days. "No, I just stood still. The truth spoke for itself." At Ashgrove Ridge, where once suspicious eyes peeked from behind curtains every time Malik passed by, now came nods, gentle good mornings. Even Mrs. Whitaker, the neighbor who had always watched with suspicion, brought over a tin of cookies, placed it on the porch, and quietly said, "I was wrong about your family. Thank you for staying true." That night, in the Carter family kitchen, Jeremiah poured 2 glasses of water, one for himself, one for his son. They sat across from each other, the golden kitchen light casting a warm halo over the table. Malik hesitated. "Do you think it's over now?" Jeremiah looked at his son and shook his head gently. "No, son. Things like this, they never end completely. But today, we won a battle." He placed his hand on the table steady, just like the man himself. Then he spoke, not loudly, not forcefully, but deeply and truly. "Justice is not the end. It's the beginning. A reminder that silence is never an option if you want to live with dignity." Ashgrove Ridge entered the new month with gentle early-season rains, not persistent, not violent, just enough to wash away the dust left behind after a long, dry spell. In a once closed-off and cautious neighborhood, the air felt lighter, not because all wounds had healed, but because the deepest pains had finally been named. At house number 58, the living room was no longer just a quiet place within 4 walls. It had become the center of something larger. Jeremiah Carter had just mounted a small, rustic plaque on the main wall, engraved with 3 words, "The Watchtower." It wasn't a training facility. It wasn't a government office. It was a space where teenagers like Malik, like Alyssa, and those who once thought, "I don't belong anywhere," could come and learn what schools didn't teach: discipline, resilience, and dignity. The first class had only 5 students. Among them were 3 who had been suspended for non-compliance, 1 who had been a victim of classroom racism, and 1 who was the son of a former police officer who used to work with Donnelly. Jeremiah didn't preach, he didn't lecture. He told stories about decisions made in the shadows, moments of choosing between silence and intervention. And the one thing he always emphasized was, a person isn't measured by how they act in victory, but by how they rise after being struck down. Malik sat in the corner of the room, quiet, observing, but his eyes no longer held the heaviness of the early days. That gaze no longer asked, "Why did this happen to me?" but instead, "What can I do now for others?" On social media, Alyssa began a documentary series titled Southridge Behind the Mask. She interviewed students, teachers, parents. She didn't focus on racism itself, but on transformation, on the raw, clumsy, but courageous conversations between people who once thought they could never understand each other. One of the videos captured Mrs. Whitaker, the woman who had once watched Malik from behind her curtains every afternoon, sitting beside him in the garden, watering lavender plants together. She spoke slowly, full of remorse. I used to think I wasn't biased, but my silence helped injustice. Thank you for not turning your back on this neighborhood. At Southridge High, the administration established a special student advisory council, and Malik was invited to join not because he was a victim, but because he had preserved his dignity through the hardest moments. One day, during a closed meeting with the principal, Malik was asked, "If you could say one thing to those who once doubted you, what would it be?" He thought for a moment, then replied, "I wouldn't say anything. I'd invite them to the Watchtower. There, they'd see what words can't explain." By the end of the month, during the Southridge Civic Recognition Ceremony, Jeremiah Carter was invited to speak before the entire town. There were no flashing cameras, no grand decorations, just a microphone, a long wooden bench, and the quiet presence of people, some of whom had once kept their distance, now sitting in silence, listening. He spoke slowly, but clearly. "I am not a hero. I'm a father. And I believe that every father, every mother can do what I did, if their heart is in the right place. Ashgrove Ridge has changed, not because of the law, but because enough hearts had the courage to look inward." As he stepped down from the podium, Malik greeted him with a nod. No words were needed. That night, the two of them stood on the front porch, the breeze brushing past the wooden plaque engraved "The Watchtower." Malik looked up at the sky, where the stars weren't blinding but always present. "Dad," he asked softly, "do you think there'll be more people like Donnelly?" Jeremiah smiled, gently squeezing his son's shoulder. "Yes, but there will also be people like you, and that is enough." Malik didn't need to shout for justice. He only needed to stand firm in his dignity, and it was that quiet strength that compelled an entire town to listen. Jeremiah didn't need weapons to protect his son. He brought integrity, preparation, and a love strong enough to face down an entire system if necessary. This story isn't just about one family. It's a reminder to all of us that injustice doesn't always come from loud actions, but sometimes from the silence of those who should have spoken up. If this story touched something deep within you, leave a comment, share this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the stories to come where light always finds a way through the darkness, because sometimes it only takes one person standing firm to change an entire community.